All right, welcome back. We are COMP229, that's Web Application Development in the summer 2022 semester at Centennial, and it's week 5 of our broadcast and recording. And this week we got lots to do as normal. So last week, what did we do? We restructured our app for MVC a little bit. And again, what we did with that is we kind of put everything under, client, server and client. So client and then server, this kind of idea. We installed Bootstrap and Font Awesome. We did that. We created a main navigation bar. We also created some EJS views for you to help you with your portfolio site. So we did the About view, Contact, Project, Services, and the Home. We kind of talked about how routing works a little bit. So hopefully you guys had a little bit of that. We also pushed our project to Heroku, and we set up our MongoDB database locally, which I told you you would need for this week for sure. And we also registered on MongoDB Atlas so we could do things remotely. Again, MongoDB Atlas is required for your assignment 2 because you're going to be communicating from your Heroku site to your MongoDB Atlas site directly online, so cloud to cloud. And that's why you need to sign up for it if you haven't done that already as soon as possible, right? So that way that's out of the way. You don't have to think about it anymore. So that's what we kind of did last week during our live session. The core shell talked about MongoDB and the Beeson data structure and a bunch of other stuff. And I also made some recordings last week, which I recommended that you should watch. Assignment 1 was due on Sunday. So now you should have already submitted that one. And we're sitting at assignment 2, which the details for assignment 2 are out as normal. And it's due right now around week 6-ish, I'm going to say it that way, which is June 19th. So we're sitting at, so it's not obviously this weekend, but next weekend is when the assignment 2 is due. And assignment 2 is based on assignment 1. So it's not, starting from scratch. You add stuff to assignment 2. And I find that assignment 2 is a little bit, in many ways, easier because assignment 1 is kind of your portfolio site. You kind of put together content and a bunch of other stuff. And then assignment 2 is just basically going on with what we talked about in class. And then on the horizon is your practical midterm tests, which is scheduled for week 7. And during that time frame, again, this is the last part of your individual assignments. And then we're going to get into the second half of semester, which is a project that we're going to be working in. I keep talking about that every week. But it's important to understand where you sit. The project has individual components as well. Some of them are weekly reports that you're going to be responsible for, as well as peer reviews. And we'll get closer to that. We'll talk about it. So again, we're sitting at week 5. The week online, if we looked at our course shell, is understanding passport strategies as well as doing full CRUD with MongoDB. And if you look online on the course shell for a second, so let's go there. It's been available since yesterday, if I'm not wrong. Then you can see that Express CRUD, I've got an hour and 16-minute video for the first part and another 30 minutes video. So you're looking at about a couple hours to watch. Guys, this is critical for you guys to know how to do. Again, everything really is critical, but this is kind of telling you what you need to do for your for the stuff you're working with for assignment 2, but we're going to be doing some of this as well. One thing that's not covered here is express authentication, which won't happen until week 6. That's next week. All right, so so that is where we're sitting right now in terms of our stuff. What we're doing today from our live session is we're going to continue to restructure for MVC. That's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be splitting out our controllers and models. We're going to add some new modules, and we're going to connect to MongoDB database. And we're going to make a little database. That's what we're going to do. So first we're going to, I probably should put that here too, create a simple database in our local MongoDB server. That's what we're going to do. And then we're going to read it, connect to it and read it, the database, and display it in a table. So lots of stuff to do, again, as always, and super little time to do everything again. So let's get moving on this because we never have time to do everything we want to do, and we always run overtime. And I try and avoid doing that. Okay, let's move to are the stuff that we had from last time. I'm continuing with, we continue working on top of our portfolio, right? For your assignment 2, yes, absolutely. Yes. But for our little lab exercise that we're doing every week, which I'm hoping you're following along, I'm just going to copy from week 4 and make week 5, because that's what we're doing this week. And let's get that done. And then we'll put this up on GitHub and all that stuff. And you can see how long this takes now compared to before, because we have many more items here. Now, I would challenge you to try this out. Try deleting your node modules folder and then do a yarn install. And you'll find that actually, if anything, it might be even faster than copying it from folder to folder. It's really funny how that works, because there's thousands of files that your machine needs to index. And I find that it's just faster sometimes to download it. All right, so there we go. So there's week 5, and we're going to kick up Visual Studio Code like we normally do. And what we're going to do is drag and drop it in. There we go. And here we are. And a couple of things we need to change. Our package.json should say week 5. There we go. Should move this over to 004. So that's the version we're moving towards. Save. And as always, what I always recommend is run it to make sure that it works when we copy it. So again, Control-Shift-B to build, to transpile, right? Make sure you transpile. And then after you've done transpiling, run it locally as an example. Because you, and again, there's a couple ways to do that. You can make a new terminal like so. No issues. And I'm going to just type in nodemon. And it should run just like before. There shouldn't be any issues with it. So if we run on localhost 3000, you should get what we did last week, which is all of this. Okay, so not much in terms of content, but at least it sets you guys up for your portfolio site for your assignment 1. That's what it was. Again, the structure is what I gave you, not real content. All right, so that's pretty cool, and it looks like it works great. Let's put this up on GitHub as a start. So again, what I'm going to do is make a new PowerShell and do a git add dot. That adds all the folders that we had last time. Git commit -m, and we'll say added project files for week 5. So again, standard stuff that we've seen before. Git push pushes it to GitHub. And again, remember that what we're doing is we have a couple of folders we're working with now. One is week 5, that's our development folder, and then we're using our Heroku live site for section 2 for you guys. For actually pushing it up to Heroku. So we're going to be trying to do that as well. Let's see if we get to that today. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we got that going, and we're going to continue with what we're doing here. So this week, again, we want to restructure for MVC. We're going to do that in a second, but I want to start with adding. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's okay. What we're going to do is we're going to add these new modules. And the new modules are going to help us connect to MongoDB. So that's what we're going to do. And we also need to create a simple database in our local MongoDB server. Let's kick that up now and start with this piece right here. Create a simple database with our MongoDB server. So to do that, again, remember to run MongoDB, we have 2 components. One of them is mongod, right? Which is what you would do is you type in our command prompt. You could run it separately like this and type in mongod or MongoD. Remember, to run MongoD, you need to, last week I went through the installation instructions. You need to have MongoDB server installed on your system. You also need a empty data folder on your C drive and an empty DB folder inside of that. So that's what we did last week. And I kind of created this. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to connect to MongoDB with Mongosh. So that's Mongosh. We did that installation last week as well. So there it is. And if I type in Mongosh here in Visual Studio Code, CLS clears the screen, and I can do something like show DBS. And show DBS shows us a couple of databases. I have a contacts database, which I'm going to get rid of right now. So I'm going to go into, and the way to remove stuff, if I want to drop the database, if I go use contacts, use means I'm using the database just like any other database structure, like for example in MySQL or SQL. If I use it, I kind of focus my attention to that. And then what I can do is I can say DB, if I say show, collections, you can see that I have a contacts and users collection in my database, and I can get rid of those. I can say db.contacts.drop. And what that does is it'll drop the data, the table equivalent. And a table in MongoDB language is called a collection, right? That's the equivalent. And we're going to do the same thing with our users. So contacts.users. So that's how you drop stuff. Now you won't have these db.contact.users.drop is what I meant to do. There we go. You won't have these, but I'm showing you how to drop databases, right? So use DBS, show DBS. So now you should have what I have, which is admin, config, and local. We don't touch any of this stuff. But what we're going to do is make a brand new database. And the brand new database we're going to make, the way you do that is you use it even before it's made. So you say something like use, and then the name of the database. We're going to make a, this semester, we're going to do like our favorite movies. So we're going to say our, kind of our media database. There we go, media. And once we say use media, you can see that it's switched to database media. We don't have a database media yet, but the way to add that in is to kind of insert something into the database. So we can say db.insert. This is how we would do it. And then what do we want to insert? We want to insert an object. This is how it looks. And when we insert an object, the object will have properties. So this is the first property we're going to add in. The name of the, let's say, for example, the collection. So first we have to say, what is the collection name? So for example, media is the database. The collection would be movies. Let's say the movies database, movies collection in the media database. Then we want to insert, that's the command. And then we want to insert an object. What are we inserting? We're inserting an object, a movie, and you need the name of the movie. So the name would be the first part. And again, be careful how you do it. If I'm going to make the name of a movie, I might have name capital M, N, name, or name lowercase n, name. It's up to you. But let's go with capitals for this semester. So name. And then the name of the database, the name of the movie that you would want. Let's say a popular movies like Star Wars back in the day, right? And then you'd probably want some more data in your model. So if I'm making my rows and tables, yes, Elias? I just typed in Mongosh. So first, again, two parts, right? I started the database here. This is my database server. And then in here, I typed in Mongosh, and it should work, should connect. So again, so name is Star Wars, and let's suppose the year would be something else we care about. Let's say the year, I believe, is 1977, right? So that's when it came out, 1977. And then maybe we want other things like the director or something else like that. Let's just use those three pieces of data, name, year, and director. Okay, something like that, okay? Director, we know it's George Lucas. Okay, so there's a few pieces of data. And we might even give it a rating, right? So you can say a rating, and you can give it some, whatever the data might be for something like this, which might be something, some people say it's like 4 stars. Because not quite as good as Empire Strikes Back, as some people like Star Wars, the original Star Wars movie. So again, you're going to close the curly braces and then close the parentheses and do that. Okay, so that is your line. I'm just going to copy this for you so you have the same thing. if you want to try what I'm doing here. And the reason why I'm showing you this is because, let's see if I can copy that in there. I can. So this is what it would look like, but you need to do this insertion as an example inside of, by switching first to a database. I just call my database media. So if I press enter here, it's going to say, okay, deprecation warning. It says collection insert is deprecated. Use one of the other three options. Insert one, insert many, or bulk write. And this is why I like Mongosh, because it kind of gives you that. But however, it'll still do what I told it to do, which is insert, all right? So the command is, hey database, I want to access the collection, which is movies, the movies collection. A collection, like we said before, is like a table in other databases. Insert is your command in this case, or you can use, obviously they want us to use insert one, insert many, or bulk write. Those are the things. And then you need to open up a bracket, just like you're accessing a method, because that really is what it is. And then we're going to insert a object literal. This is the object literal, which is our name. That includes 4 different properties: name, year, directory, and rating. And then we entered that data in there. So we have key value pairs, just like we normally do with some kind of object literal. And then it gave us an acknowledgement, true, do we insert something or not? And it also gave us an ID for our record, right? Which is in this case a document for MongoDB. So to see the actual object, first of all, we can say show collections now. Once we've inserted a document, it creates a collection for us in the name that we used. So movies would be the collection. When we insert into movies, we create the collection. That's how it works, okay, in this case. When we use the database, our media database, we create the media database. So if I say it's something like show DBS now, you can see that we also clearly have a media database. There it is, okay? And then what we want to do, right, is if I want to go to the collection and see the data, I could say something like db dot and the collection name, which is movies dot, and I want to find, right? If I did find, then you can see find shows me the movie that I just put in, okay? So that's what find does. There used to be a find pretty, which actually just does exactly what we're seeing here, okay? So that's what we used to do. So we could say something like db.movies.find.pretty, but you can see that pretty and the normal find now in Mongosh is pretty much identical, okay? And so that's what it does. It gives us an ID that was generated for us. This was generated by MongoDB. And then here is our name, year, directory, and rating. Those are our properties of our object literal, right? And that's what we want to enter in. Well, if this is what we want to do, right? If this here is what we want to do, then what we want to do is kind of put together some mock data so we can use it like this. And then so we don't have to type all this in manually. Let's do that. So I'm going to go into my client side, and where it says data, we have our data.json. That was just some test data that we used to read our client. I want to use our data directory again, but I want to create some mock data for us. I'm going to make a new file, and I'm going to call this movies, right? And the movie database is going to be exactly what I showed you. So it's going to be some curly braces, right, for our movies. And remember that with JSON data, you have to have some kind of description for everything. So if I want to make a movies collection, it's just an array, right? So movies is an array. And then we want curly braces for each of the objects of our array. I'm just making the object literal here to show you what it would look like. So again, instead of kind of typing it out, I'm just going to grab all this, copy, and I'm just going to paste it in there, right? And what we don't need is this part. This doesn't compute for us. And remember that everything has to be in some kind of quotations, right? Not in single quotes. It's got to be in double quotes all the time. For whenever we use JSON data, it's got to look like this. Okay, so this is kind of the way it's going to look. And everything should be in quotations, right? So again, it's going to look like this. And why am I doing this? Because at the end of the day, what we want to do is set up our data. So if I want to recreate this, as an example, if I want to recreate this in up online, I can do so. That's the idea behind it. Okay, so there we go. All right, so that you can see that there are some issues. So what would be the issue? Well, we need this one here as well. How about that? Oops. There we go. And now we can see that this is the first piece of data we put in there. And I'm just mirroring what we actually added into the database down here. So this is our first piece of data. Well, we know what the data would look like: name, year, director, and rating. And I'm just going to kind of copy paste this. And let's add a couple more movies, maybe some more modern movies that are not from 77, right? So let's do that. db.insert. Yeah, it's actually up on the chat there. I put it up there. If you kind of scroll up, it should be there for you. db.movies.insert, just above you. Oh, wait, it went to the wrong place. I sent it to one person instead of everybody. Oh yeah, okay. This is what it looks like. Woohoo! Okay. So, so I want to insert. I want to add some more mock data, and I want to have more modern names of movies that we want to use. We just had Spider-Man No Way Home. Let's use that one. Spider-Man No Way Home was the name of the title of the movie. So we can get some information for that. So we can, if I was to look at Spider-Man No Way Home, right? And we can see, to make sure it looks exactly how it should, we can get some information from Wikipedia on the details. So we can see that it's called Spider-Man, which is weird. But anyways, Spider-Man No Way Home, right? And we know when it came out. We can see that the release date was December 13th, 2021. I'm just going to go with the year, not the whole date, because that's just, too much details for us. And the director, if you look at directed by John Watts. So John Watts, there we go. And I know it just won the MTV Award last night, so we'll give it, let's say, 4.5 stars. I'm just making this up as we go, but this is the next one, okay? So let's add one more. Just have a few pieces of data to play with in the database. This is what I want the data to look like, and I'm modeling it, hint, hint, modeling the data by creating some information that I want to use in the future. So let's do one more. So let's suppose I want another movie that came out maybe this year. And let's just say, top 10 movies of 2022, right? We can see a good list of the best movies so far. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, I heard is supposed to be pretty awesome. I haven't seen it, but that is what they say is kind of one of the best movies out there right now for some reason. And that's fine. I don't know what it is. I haven't seen it. Hopefully, maybe some of you have, but let's see what that looks like. So this is the title, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, right? And it's good that we have a long title like this because we want to, well, what did I do there? We want to make sure that we have, copy again, something that tests our, kind of a longer title, a shorter title, a medium title. And then the year it was released, you can see down here was 2022. So that makes sense. And the director, who is that? It was directed by a couple of people, Dan Kwan and Danielle. So that's interesting. So we have a couple of directors. What do we do there? I'm just going to put one for now because we don't have directors. But we could think about that. Dan Kwan, let's say. It's supposed to be 5 stars. All right, so there we go. All right, so that is that's some data that we have. And of course, what I want to do is share this data with you, so you don't have to do it for yourself. So what I'm going to do is just going to week 5 and grab that data, which is this movies.json, and drag and drop it into your chat there. So if you want to grab that movies.json, so you don't have to type it again, it's there. Okay, so it should be up on your chat. Hopefully that helps. And so if this is the data that I want to use, we have this piece in there, but I want to add in this piece and this piece. How do I do that with our shell, our MongoDB shell? So the way you do that, of course, is the same thing. You do a db dot the name of your collection, which is movies, dot insert one. That's what they want us to use. And then inside there, I'm just going to grab that data. So I'm going to go Spider-Man No Way Home, grab all this, copy it, and then right-click there, which adds the data in there, and it kind of gives me some spaces. Then close off the parentheses and with a curly brace, and done. And then it says, hey, we're good. Let's do the same thing with our next one. So db.movies.insert1. And then we put in the opening brace, and then we go into the next movie, grab all this, copy it, right click, and then close off the bracket and enter. And now we have 3 pieces of data in the database. You should have the same thing as me. How do we check it? Well, we can, CLS clears the screen. We can do a show collections. Again, you can see we have our movies collection. We see db.movies.find. We just did a find. It looks like this. It's exactly what we want. And this is the data. Notice that it gave us 3 IDs, and they're sequential, but they're made of kind of different numbers, different hash code. The thing to notice is that the last part, which is pretty much from about right here, right, is the entire thing is the same, but then 8, 9, and 10, A is 10 hexadecimal, right, is all of this. So it kind of gives it to you in a sequential order. So there's our data. Okay. Are you with me? Check mark if you got this data in the database, or X if you're still having trouble with MongoDB and MongoDB shell and all that stuff. If you have trouble, you need to fix this problem, because we're going to be using MongoDB for your locally for your midterm test. So you need to get that ready to go if you haven't had this going. I got 4 of you out of 25 of you. So should I wait a little longer, or should I continue, guys? Because you guys should be kind of going along with me as much as possible. I've given you the file. All you need to really do is enter it in. Okay. Rajan, if you want to go put on the mic, go ahead. I see your hand.
Hello, Professor. Good morning.
How you doing?
How are you?
Good. Oh. Yeah, we can do a one-on-one, sure.
Thank you so much.
All right. Anyone else have this? Okay, so Bhupinder, do you have your MongoDB running right now? Your MongoDB server. If it's not running like this, right, then it won't work for you. You would run it by going to your command prompt, right? So you can run it like by going here to your command prompt. Let's say we do command and then type in mongod like that, and then press enter. Right? That's what you should do. If you can't run that, then it won't work.
Thank you.
All right, so now that we've got this, hopefully I see some of you got it, not a lot, but it'd be nice if more of you followed along, because the important thing for here is to do it so you understand it. But again, some people learn differently. You might be watching the video later or whatever. Okay, so now that we have this, excellent. That's nice. I want to be able to connect to MongoDB through our application that we've been making. And when we connect to MongoDB, I want to get this data and output it somewhere into a view that we have to create as well. So that's kind of some steps, our next steps. Let's, I'm just going to temporarily close this window down. So I'm going to quit from our MongoDB shell. I'm going to keep my MongoDB server open. I'm not going to quit this. I'm just quitting the shell, the connection, the client information, right? And what I want to do here is I want to add some more modules, like I said. So to connect to MongoDB, we're going to use something called Mongoose. Mongoose is another NPM module that we're going to use, Mongoose, right? And this is the link for it. And Mongoose, notice it's showing us here, this is our common JS module pattern that we're seeing with requires, right, and so on. But basically what Mongoose does is it allows us to connect to the MongoDB database. So the way that we connect to the MongoDB database is we use MongoDB : / your IP address and : the name of the port number. So 27017 is a typical port, followed by the name of the database. This is the database right there. So that's how we would connect typically to the MongoDB server. And we need to, if we look at Quick Start Guide, it talks about how to install. So this is npm install mongoose -- save. We're going to use yarn, of course, so it's going to be very similar to this, but we're going to say add instead of save. Let's try this out. So back down to here, again, I'm just going to take a look at our package.json so you can see it. Here's our package.json here. And we're going to add our new module, right? So we're going to say here, yarn add mongoose, right? And then once we do that, we're done. It just adds that in. There it is, right? And you can see that mongoose was nicely entered. That's the module that we're going to use to connect to MongoDB. Just to be ready for next week, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in some additional modules. And I kind of mentioned that up here. So mongoose is one of them, but I want to add a few more. So one of them is called connect flash. So we're going to say yarn add and then connect flash. Okay. We're going to add them all at once. So connect flash cores. So cores is cross origin resource sharing. We're going to add that in. We're also going to add our 3 modules for authentication to set us up this week so that we don't have to do it next week. So passport local, and passport local mongoose. Okay, so passport, right? And actually, you don't need commas. Cores, passport, and passport local, and passport local mongoose. Okay, so that's what I added in, right? Those are the ones, and I'm just going to copy this whole line. And what I recommend to you, let's see if we can paste it in there, is do it with me. So actually add those modules in. So if you add them in, you can see that it's going to go up, grab those modules, and it'll put all those modules in all at once. Okay, that's what we kind of need. There it is, passport local mongoose, and mongoose, as well as cores and connect flash. Connect flash is one thing that we know is if I want to put an error message up on my screen while I'm refreshing my page, for example, some kind of login, log out screen. The biggest problem with messages is that when you refresh your page, if I kind of log in and if I type submit or log in, it will refresh the page and I won't have any messages to give you back if you fail to log in. Connect Flash uses our local storage is what it does, and it saves the message there for you and then spits it out the next time you go back to that page, which is kind of an interesting way that happens. It happens on the server side, and it's a little module that can help us do that. That's what that is. Mongoose, again, is the way we connect to the database. We're going to do that in a second. Passport local mongoose, we're going to talk about next week when we authenticate. That's going to help us log in, log out, and all that stuff as well. Okay, so really the one we really need today is mongoose, but I've given you some other ones just to make sure that we're ready to go. So again, the 4 are, or the ones that I added in are connect flash, cores, mongoose, passport local mongoose. These are the ones. But we need some good support, and there's also dev dependencies that we can add in to get some good TypeScript support. So I'm going to do that now. By the way, whether you use TypeScript or not, you can still use dev dependencies, which is pretty cool. So again, I'm going to say yarn add at types, and I want to add in mongoose in there for sure, right? As well as at types passport. Let's add all those in. At types passport local, and at types passport local mongoose, as well as at types cores and at types connect flash. So remember what these do is what this whole thing allows us to do or helps us do is get good code hinting and code coloring for our application. So that's what the command is there. I'm going to put that in there. And you can see that it's going to grab everything. And if I need anything, it's going, or if I have a problem, it's going to tell me. So obviously, look, I typed in connect flash wrong, and I can do that. I can go back up and I can kind of scoot back to where I made the error. There's the error, and just try it again. And it's not going to hurt anything if I did. There we go, right? So that is all the modules. And if I did it wrong, let's say they went into the wrong spot, like these went into the wrong spot, we can remove them, right? So we can do the same thing. We can say, hey, yarn remove, right? Let's say I put them in the wrong spot, like you put them in the wrong spot like me. They should go in the dev dependencies, right? I could do yarn remove and do that. Yarn remove, I'll be okay. I meant the first one, right? So let's say if I have a problem, I can go and just do remove. There they are. And then I can add them back in, right? There's yarn add, but I want to say minus minus dev for the dev dependency, and I put them in there. So you can move things around, no problem. And you can see now that they're in the dev dependency area by me removing them and put them back. You can't just move them in there, right? I mean, you could, but by switching the package.json, but it's just sometimes a little easier just to do it this way. So notice this is what my package.json looks like now. And what I'm going to do to help you again is so that way you have what I have is I'm just going to go into my desktop here, and I'm going to give you my package.json that you can compare my package.json with your package.json, because otherwise, you know, people have some really funky things happen when they don't have the same configuration. There's my package.json. Let's try that out. There we go. I'm sending that to you. All right, so a couple of questions I got. I don't know why I still can't use Mongo. Still installed last week, and manual add and database files to C drive. But when I type MongoDB or Mongosh in command, the computer shows is not recognized. Okay, so we're going to fix that problem. Kevin, stick around. Johan says, Prof, when I run the command, I get this message, yarn, the term yarn is not recognized. Okay, you need to fix that 100% if your yarn is not recognized at this point. Yeah, so stick around again for those people. We'll see if I can fix you after this. Okay, so for everyone else, hopefully you've installed your modules and they're working. And now that I've got those modules in, I need to do some configuration changes here. So my movies.json is literally just some data that I can use, and I'm going to use this data later on, because if I want to go up and put the exact same test data, which is what this is, on MongoDB Atlas later on, maybe not today, I want to have at least this same structure. Okay, that's the one. What we want to do now is do some restructuring in our application. We haven't really done anything except for adding modules right now. We also made a brand new database for us locally. But in terms of what we've added, we've changed the tsconfig.json file, the package.json files where we've added stuff in. So let's say something like we added support for Mongoose and everything else. So we'll say git add dot. Those are the things we've added. We've added this 1,000 plus files. And we'll say git commit -m, and we'll say added support for MongoDB access. I'm not going to put in authentication because we did all that stuff, right? And then we're going to say git push, which will push everything up to GitHub. There we go. We have another commit. Nice. Okay, so we've done all that work. We're good to go with that. Now we want to restructure. So in our server folder, we only have a views folder and we have a routes folder, but we don't have a models folder and we don't have a controllers folder. Let's do that now. So server folder, we're adding 2 more folders, a models folder, and we're also going to add in our servers folder, a controllers folder. So there's models and controllers, okay? And I mentioned this last time, before we actually connect to the database, it's good to restructure. And again, things that we've done so far, just to let you know for this week's live session so far, is we created a simple database in our local server. That's what we've done so far. We've also added the new modules, but we didn't do the restructuring, which is what we're going to do now. We're going to split out controllers and models. Our controllers folder is empty, but actually our controllers are inside of our routes. Remember last week we talked about this, that our index.ts file has two parts to each of the routes, right? The one part, just to get you guys in there with this, the one part of the route is the first part. So this part here is the route itself, from here to here. That's the route, right? Router.get. And there's also this piece here, which tells us the path. That's the path we're looking at. This is the path in the URL. So when a user types in this in the URL, so your page name, so or your domain, localhost, let's say as an example, or whatever your domain would have been called, /about, that is your path. That is the URL path. All right, right here. These pieces. This is all part of the router. Okay. And then there's a second piece, which is part of the controller. And the controller is starts off here with this callback function, and it wraps around all of this. So this is the controller piece. Okay, so this is it right here. This is the controller. We don't want this logic, this controller logic, to be inside of the router, right? So can you repeat what you said to delete all node modules and install again? For which part, Elias? If you typed it wrong? Because I typed it wrong.
When you were copying the file a week, you said it's easier when we delete node models and install it and everything join. How do we do that?
Okay, sure. I'll show you how to do that. So, but let me just continue with this for a second. So yeah, so this part here is your logic for the controller, and this part here would be your router. Okay, that's the kind of part there that you have. You use the up arrow, Paul. Up arrow gets you back into the previous commands. All right, so if that's true, that means that this part here is the same. This part here, you can see this is still the logic for your, I'm just roughly drawing it. These the same thing, right? These two things, this one and this one are identical, right? These ones are equal to each other, right? So if we use one piece of logic, it'll hit both routes in this case, right? And this one is a little different because this one has information about the about page, really, right? And it's got a different, page. This is the stuff that's different. About us is different, and about is different, as an example. So it's a different piece of logic compared to everything else. So that's what we want to do. We want to split out this logic, right? And make a new module for our controllers. We're going to put a new module, an index controller in there, and split out this logic. So this piece is going to be moved. This piece is going to be moved. This piece is going to be moved, and all the other pieces here too. All right. So let's just clear that up. And let's do what Elias asked. So how do you do it? The way you would do this, let's say, for example, if I deleted, first of all, let's stop everything from running in order for me to do this. Let's Control C. Just going to move. I'm just going to make sure that whenever you do this kind of stuff, stop your things from running, or else it'll stop you, like node modules. Nodemon. I stopped that too. So everything is stopped. But the way you would do that, if I was going to reinstall node modules, so if I was doing it through the operating system, and if I was, let's say I was copying week 5, then you would just delete node modules, so delete it. And I would probably do a shift delete just to make sure it doesn't go into the recycle bin. And so it's gone. And then when you copy paste it, if I was to copy paste week 5 into week 6, let's say, then it's way faster. Watch. If I was to do, I'm not going to do it now. I'm going to delete week 6 in a second because we don't need week 6. That's for next week, right? But if I was going to do that, I would just make a brand new module, right? There's week 6, and it copied like that quick, right? And then what you would do is you would just install the node modules again. And the way to do that, I'm just going to delete this now because we don't need that. Just want to show you how fast that was, really fast, right? The way to do that, because we deleted it here, is we would say something like a yarn install. Yarn install would install everything again. Watch. That just basically looks at your package.json file. That's what it does, right? And installs all the dependencies from scratch. So if I take a look at my package.json file, this is the steering instructions. These things here, right? These things here are the steering instructions for my entire application. So basically, if I do a yarn install and they have no node modules folder, it just installs it for me, all those things. Okay, so that's really another way to do installations, right? If you really want to, right? If you really want to, what you can do is you can go up to just add a module that's not here, let's say as an example. And what Yarn will do, if you do a Yarn install, it'll take that module, whatever you want, and install it for you, but just typing it here as opposed to down here. That's definitely another way of doing things. All right, so
the last yarn types was missing management, is that right?
Yes, it was. Yeah. So if I looked at the commands that I remember, I can always go back. It's this one. So yarn add types, and then you see that I did all that. Notice that you can always scroll up and down through your list by using your arrow keys. Arrow keys allows you to go up and down. All right. So excellent. So I've gone and done that, and a couple of things to notice. I got about all these GitHub repositories. And it says that I remove node modules, right? And I did that, and then I put them back. So I have these like 4,000 files again, that you can see that I did that. And I'm not worried, about this. This is just basically deleting, and it just shows me my deletion and then my, that I've removed node modules, but I put them back, right? So this is what this does. This is what this is, right? It shows me that stuff. So I'll say that. I'll say, whenever you have something like this, it's a git add dot. And then what we want to do is we want to say something like, git commit -m, and we'll say updated project files, something like that. Because we really didn't do anything here. Yeah, see? Didn't even do anything. And if I do a git push, I mean, it doesn't really do much. Everything's up to date because nothing's going on, right? Anyway, so there's this. And notice again, package.json, index.ts, movies.json are the things that I've got open, and we want to restructure more. So I did my controllers, I made my controllers folder, and I was talking about my routes, which is my index.ts file, and I want to split this out into a controllers file. So the way to do that is to go into controllers, right click, and add a new file, and we'll call this index.ts. Again, same name, funny. And when you look at this, this is like when you see index.ts, again, I'm not transpiling. Let's transpile. Control-Shift-B. Control-Shift-B. Right? I'm just going to start everything over because I had to delete my node modules just to demonstrate that. What we want to do is yarn package not found. No, I don't have that error. Unless your connect flash. Oh, your connect flash is spelled wrong, Elias. I made a mistake. So connect flash should be connect, not CONNCT. Just do it again, and it'll tell you where the error is. There it is. All right, so here's my index controller, and what I want to do is I want to split out this data, right? So again, things to be smart about is I'm probably going to need Express. Okay, I'm probably going to need Express. So let's get Express into this new module I'm making. So in my controllers folder, I'm going to add Express as something that I want in. Okay, so this is the first part. Next piece. With Express is I want to start thinking about what I'm exporting, right? Because I'm going to export my module somehow, right? So again, whenever we make a module, we need some kind of export statement, all right? This is the thing that we would need at the end, someplace, right? So one thing is we're going to have all these functions, and we could have as an example, we can have in here a bunch of functions, that are part of one export. So export defaults, you could create something like export and then the name that you want to export, for example, my module, right? And you could say something like this in Node, this is something that you might want to do, right? Export defaults. And then some kind of object that you want to export some object, as an example, right? And each object you can have in here, you can have several functions. Instead of doing several functions in one object, I'm going to make several functions, each using the export command. So the first one would be obviously you need to use the keyword function. and then the name of a function that would make sense for the first thing that I'm doing. So if I want to move my controller logic from my index route, this part right here, right? And notice that I have this function right here. This is the function, right? Well, this function here is really displaying the home page. So I'm going to call the new function inside of my index.ts in my controllers file folder, the display home. Display home page is what the function is going to be called, right? And display home page is what I want the function to be called. And what I need to do is pass in parameters that are similar to what I have in my index route. So really what I want is all of these parameters right here. Okay, these parameters. And that's going to go right here. Okay, so this is my parameter list. So I got my request, response, and next, my next function, which is pointing to the next middleware function. That's what that does. And then some curly braces, right, like any function would have, right? And the logic that would go in here in the function. So if I was going to go back to the page, let's go back to that page, then the logic is really just this. All right, that's the function itself. So I want to go back to this and pop that in. And that is my first controller function, display homepage. We gave it a name, but really, if you think about what we did, we just copied this whole function here like this, and we're going to give it a name called display homepage. Okay, cool. So that is the function name. That is the name that we're using. Okay, good. How do I use this function? Well, first of all, because I use the export keyword, then suddenly my index.ts, my controller index, my index controller, right? That's what it is. My index controller is actually now a module. It's a module. So I need to import this module so I can use it again, because that's how it works when we want to connect to JavaScript pieces of code in Node. We have to connect them by using the module pattern. And the way to do that, of course, is use the import keyword. Okay, cool. So back in routes, if I want to use that module, I can say I want to import. So we want to import the module, which is the controller module, right? And the way to do that is you're going to use the import keyword, the name of the module that we want to use. Okay, so if we think about what this is the index controller. Okay, that's what the this thing is, the index controller. So we could call it, when we insert it here in the import, something like index controller. I could do that. Or suffice it something like I want to import my index controller, and we can say from where? We want to give it the path to the controller, which means I want to go up one level to server and down into controllers into my index.ts. So it would be, the path would be ... right? And it would be controllers. And inside my index controllers, we don't have to put in the .js or tx. So that's what it would look like. So import index controller from this. And let's type actually controller with 2 L's. And then it tells us there's an issue. It says that index controller is declared, but its value is never read. It says module, blah, 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 has no default export. Okay, so that's why it's giving us this error. What it's really looking for is, instead of us naming the module, what it's looking for is which function do I want from the module itself, right? So I could specifically say that inside of my index controller, I want the display homepage function. And the way to do that is, instead of using a name like this, we can say simply, I want the display homepage module or function. That's what I want. I want the display homepage function, only that one, from the index controllers module. That's what we want. And then if I was to do it this way, and if I want to use it here instead of my function here, I literally just replace this function call with display homepage. That's it. And if you notice, if I do that again, because this one is the same for both the / route as well as for the home route, then that is how my router is going to start looking, which is much nicer than all this stuff. And why is it nicer? Because we still need the code, but the code is squirreled away here inside of one file. And so all of my controller code is here in one place. This is the logic behind the view. And here inside my routes, all we care about is the actual route, which is a router.get, and we do some kind of display homepage. So some people look at this as very excessive because you're connecting two pieces of code, you're adding code. Yes, you are. But remember that I can easily maintain this because I can look at one file for all of the logic, right? Compare all the logic. And I can add to the logic immediately, and it'll affect, potentially everything that's in here. I can also reuse some of the pages that I want to do over and over again if I need to. All right, so that's display homepage. I want to do the same thing for my about page and my projects page, my services page, my contact page. I want to have all those also added in my controllers folder. So let's just add some snippets. So here's export function. We're going to make another export function. We'll call this display about page. That's what it'll be. And I want to grab the same request response and next, because that's what it was in the previous one. Here it is. And I'm just going to make that blank for now, right? And then let's just add the other one. So copy, paste. And this one will be display the projects page. And copy, paste. Oop. How about we just copy, paste properly? Copy, paste. There we go. Wow, what happened? I don't know, but we don't care because we're just going to do it my way. Copy, paste. There we go. Okay, display services. There we go. So I'm just making some stubs. These are stubs because stubs are empty, functions, empty functions. And we want to add them in. So again, we have home, about, project, services, and contact, the 5-page site that we talked about before. So there's, let's add one more. And this is a contact page. The only thing that really changes is the stuff inside where it says the same thing. And I'm just going to copy and paste that from my index.ts file, which is here, right? So this is the stuff that we already have for my router. So I'm going to grab this piece. That's the only thing that changes. And let's do a side-by-side. And the way you do a side-by-side is you can do a split screen, like so, by using this split screen button. And I want on the right side to be my new controller. So here would be my this part, and this part here was going to be my controllers. So my index controller, there we go. So my index controller on the right, and then my routes on the left. And I want to grab this piece. So I want to cut it out for here and put it here. And I want to cut this out for my projects and put that there. And I want to cut this out for my services because they're identical right now. There's no changes so far. And put that there. And finally, my contact page, I want to grab that from there and put it over here. So far, everything is just reorganizing. But how do I change this part here, my about, project, services, and contact? I want to get rid of these functions. And I could certainly type it up here because we have the names now: display home page, display about page, display project page, services page, and contact page. But wouldn't it be nice if it was easier? And it is, actually. If you once you've defined these here, if I was to go to my about, route and type in display, you can see that there are some options that Visual Studio Code comes up with. And some of them are the names we want. For example, because Visual Studio Code has been listening to what we've been typing, and notice it's going to suggest some options for you. Some of them are going to show ABC like this, okay? And some of them are going to show this little purple cube. That's what it looks like. Guys, the purple cube means method. And if I click on the purple cube version of our, the option, so I want to display, I start typing display, it's pulling up some information, code hinting. If I type the purple cube in here for the one I want, for example, the display about page, let's say I click this one, not only does it put that in here, but it also inserts the function up here inside my import statement without me having to type it. That's pretty good. Let's try that again. So again, I'm just going to select all that from my projects page and start typing display projects page. And again, I'm going to select the one with the cube, the purple cube, which actually inserts the import statement as well. Let's do that again. Last time for my services page. So again, display services page. And then I can do the same thing for my display context page. So here it is, display context page. Notice I'm just choosing the one with the cube here, this little purple cube, which actually connects my import statement with my controller. So now we have everything side by side. This is what my controller would look like. And now this is what my router would look like. So my router is actually using some functions that it's getting from the import statement on line 5 here from the controller. So this is how we import the controller module, right? And again, there's another way of doing this as well that I'm going to show you another day. But basically, this is how it looks here. So I'm going to say import. And if you really wanted to, and if it wasn't working for you, this automatic stuff that I was showing you, you can certainly just type it in. Type in each of the names of the functions that you want to insert from or import from the controller's module. And the controller's module has to be correct in terms of its path in order for it to work. Yeah, so if it's not working, Bhupinder, the reason why, it could be a number of reasons. One of them could be that you haven't finished saving your controller's file. That's one thing. It could be that you're not transpiling it. It could be that that you haven't inserted the import statement properly. It could be a lot of things. So that's why I say you can just type it in. If you type in the first one and it hits display homepage, it will light up when you use it. So example, if I don't use my display homepage, right, as an example, then it will stay dim when I use it, when I don't use it, right? So that's one thing that'll happen. If I was to save this now, my display homepage, well, I'm actually using it here too. Let's say if I don't do it, notice how that is dim. It's kind of like a gray, and this is more like a blue color. Well, when it gets used, it shows up in this blue color for me, which basically indicates that I'm using it. Okay, so let's undo those changes. So, and now you can see that it lights up as blue as well. All right, so now the test is to check to see if still we're getting everything working with this new structure. So this is the new structure. I'm just going to close these off. So the new structure is we have an index.ts file now. This is our in our controllers folder that has all of my controller logic. So this is the controller logic inside of my controllers folder. And then in my routes, we only have routing. That's all we have, just routing. These are the routes. And I'm using the controller logic. I'm pointing to the controller logic inside of my controllers file. That's what I'm doing with what I'm doing. So let's make that work. In NodeMon, if we were to get an issue, we would see it pretty much right away if I went here. And if I go up online to my page, and if I press refresh, then we would see that we're still pretty good in terms of how this worked. Okay, so no issues getting the pages. If I go from one page to the other, we should still be able to route properly, because at the end of the day, we're just going through the router, and the router is connecting to our controller and injecting the data right here from our controller. That's how it works. Yarn lock, what it does is it keeps track of all the modules that you've added in, if you notice, and their hash for a validation. It validates that the module is the one that you wanted, right? And that's what it does for all of them, and that's why it's kind of a security thing as well. And you need yarn lock in order for you to put your stuff up, either yarn lock or a npm lock to put it up on package.json, right? So npm lock would be your package.json.lock file. All right, so that's what it looks like. So now that we've done that, let's put this up on GitHub. So we'll say git add dot git commit -m, and we'll say split router into controller git push, which is what we did. There it is. And now you have my stuff. Remember that if you're trying to follow along online, you can always compare my code to your code. So if you actually go up online to github.com /Centennial College, you'll see that the one we're working on right now is this one. So this is the link. You can always follow along here. If just in case, as an example, you're falling behind, you can always go to week 5, which is this right here. And you can just zap right into your server, which is what we're working on. You can look at controllers and your index.ts, and you can see all the logic that I put in here, which is just basically a copy paste of what we did last week. Okay, so you can always go in here and see this. You don't have to fret or worry because all the stuff that I'm doing, I'm putting it up online. All right, so, and this is even for after we stop recording. So yeah, so we've got our controller done, and now it works properly. We tested it with NodeMon, so NodeMon telling us that everything is working okay. But what we want to do is we want to create our model, because remember, inside of our data, we had some mock data that we used for our database. It looks kind of like this, and our model should kind of be the same way. We need to have a model class, a class basically, that has the following properties: name, year, director, and rating. That is what we're going to be using with our model. So inside of our models folder, we need a new file. We're going to call that file something like the movie model, right? The same name as the movies collection, but in single. So the movie model, right? So in models, I'm going to make a brand new file. I'm going to call this the movie.ts file, movie.ts. So it's the movie model. That's how you read it. The movie model in the server, right? The movie model. All right, so how do I make the movie model? Well, we need a couple of different things up here. And one of them is, of course, Mongoose, because we haven't connected to Mongoose in a second. We haven't done that. And there's going to be some other things we're going to use as well. So let's go in there. We're kind of doing this a little backwards compared to what I normally do. But I want to make the model first before we change our configuration. So, and I find that this is a little bit easier for people to understand. So import, we're going to make the import statement. We're going to use Mongoose. Remember, Mongoose, we talked about this before, is a way to connect to the database. Okay. From Mongoose, it should come up for you. There we are. And then I want to make an alias for something called a schema. So there's our schema, which we're going to call the mongoose.schema. So whenever we do this, right, whenever you see this kind of thing, it's kind of a shorthand. Schema is kind of a shorthand for Mongoose schema. We don't need to do this, but we're doing it to make it so that we don't have to type in Mongoose schema, okay? And this is kind of an alias for mongoose.schema. That's what we're doing. And then it would look like this. Const, we would make the name of my schema. We'll call this the movie schema. Schema is kind of almost like a structure, or think about this as your table information in a regular database. So movie schema is equal to a new schema object, right? And the schema object is we're going to use the constructor notation for the schema object. The schema object is going to take a couple of pieces of data. So we're going to pass in the name of our data. So one of the pieces of data is name. By the way, we can do a side-by-side to take a look at the schema. So here's our side-by-side again. And I'm going to go back to my data here. And we can see what our data looks like. Our data looks like name, year, director, and rating. We want the schema to be the same. So instead of name like this, we can just put in name, okay, the name of the property, followed by the type. So I think name should be a string. Notice that it's not a string like it is in Typescript. This is actually a Mongoose or a MongoDB schema type. Okay, so this is using Mongoose. I'm not using necessarily Typescript here. So whether you're using JavaScript or TypeScript, it's going to look the same. Comma. And then we could put in the next thing, which is the name and then the year. Now, a couple things for the year. We could make this a date type, which is very specific. So I can say date, right? That's the type that we want. And then followed by, but remember how we entered it here. We entered it in 1977, and we didn't enter a date. We actually entered a string. So yes, we could make it a date, but to make it simple, let's make it a string for now. And we'll make everything strings. The director is John Watts, so that or George Lucas or Dan Kwan, so I'll make that a string as well. And then the rating system, again, you can make it so that it's a string, or you can make it so it's a number. It's really up to you. I'm going to make mine a string as well. So everything is a string for now, because that's what we're seeing over here. Okay, and that's the first part of our schema. You're defining how your table data or your collection of data is going to be stored. Collection, again, when we think about it, is a equivalent term for table in MySQL or SQL databases, which are relational databases. Here, this is a non-relational database that is taking the form of JSON data. This is what it looks like. And if you read last week's course shell or watched the little videos that I made, then it'll tell you more about that. All right, so year, name, director, and rating is the first piece. We also need to tell Mongoose what the collection name is. At least I like to tell it. You don't have to, but I do. And I say the collection is named movies. Okay, make sure that the collection name is the same name that you're using in your database, their local database. And to check this again, we can always open up our Mongosh or a Mongo shell, right? And again, what I can do is I can do show databases, right? In the media database, and then I can use media. So I'm using the database, and then I can show collections, and you can see my collections is called movies. So movies, lowercase for movies, and that's the collection name that I'm putting here in the schema. Okay, let's quit again. So we don't care about this right now. So this is how we're creating our schema. We've used the same structure that we've put into our database locally, and this structure, everything, including the way the properties are named, like capitals, and the way this is named here, all capitals. This has to match, and the names, the data types here, which are not data types that are normal. There are Mongoose data types here, right? Mongoose data types. They also have to match the data that you're inputting into the database, okay? Into the collection. All right, so that's that first part. We've created a schema. We've used constructor notation to give the data to the schema itself. The schema is something that is a Mongoose construct, right? And then what we can do is we can say, well, the model that we want to export is actually going to be a mongoose.model, mongoose model, where we're going to call the mongoose model movies. That's going to be the model friendly name we're going to give it here on the server, followed by the schema we're going to use, which is, of course, the movie schema. We just made that. So then we've just made a model. And if you hover over that, it'll tell you that this model is declared but is never used. But mongoose model, right, if you notice, it says our mongoose model, it says, if you scroll down here, it says, gives you the details about how this is structured, okay? We can close this off so you don't see the split screen anymore. So again, I'm going to go over it in one more time. And then finally, we need to export this thing because this here is a module. So we're going to say export default, and we're going to call this model. So we could probably have done this in one line, but I'm doing it in 2 lines to see it. So let's talk about our steps. So step 1, when we make a model, right? So step 1, import Mongoose. All right. Step 2 is down here, really. This schema thing is just me making an alias, so we can do this. But step 2, create a schema that matches the data. Okay, that's what it has to be. The schema you have here should match the data, right? And then step 3, create a model using the schema. And then, of course, always at the end, step 4, export the model, right? Because we want to be able to use this. This creates a or makes this model become a module. This makes the file a module. Okay, once we do the export default part, it creates a module out of this file. All right, so this is important to do. So that's the steps, and let's put this up on GitHub. So again, just like last time, we'll say git add dot git commit -m, and we'll say added movies or movie model. Git push. That's our movie model. Questions around the model process, right? And the controller process, because so far we've added a controller and we added a model, a movie model. Any questions around this? Is this clear? How about that? Check mark if you understand, X if you don't quite understand what I'm doing. I had 5 people answering me today so far out of 26. Either some of you are distracted or doing something else, or you're online, but you're not engaged. So 7 people. So guys, if you don't get this, certainly, I mean, it's being recorded, but I mean, this is your chance to ask the questions, right? So this is why I'm putting it up there. Thank you for that feedback for those people who answered. All right, so we've got a route, we've got our model, and now we need to do some configuration changes. And the configuration changes have to be in our config folder, right? I'm not going to start with my app.ts. I'm going to add a new file, right? And my new file is going to be my database configuration, which is going to include my my connection details. Okay, so this is what my connection details are going to be. So let's add this in. So I'm going to make a brand new file. So again, new file. I'm doing it a little bit backwards from what I did on the video up online. I'm going to call this db.ts. Here's my database configuration. So db, the way you read this again is your database configuration, or db config. Okay, and inside here, I'm going to do it a little bit differently again, just to show you other variations in export. I can do an export const, so what I want, and I want to call this the local URI. That's the connector, the connection string. And we're going to use MongoDB, just like I showed you earlier, / the name of the IP address or domain name, so localhost, right? Followed by the port number, if I need to use it. So for example, 27017 would be the port number, followed by my database name, which is media. That's typically how it would work. Now this may fail because locally MongoDB does not need 27017, but this is kind of how the local URI, which is the connection string, would look inside of my database. And why am I putting it here? Because this way I can keep it abstracted away from my configuration, and I can change it in one place, and it changes it everywhere I use local URI. If I put local URI inside of my app.ts and I used it other places somehow, I mean, I would have to reference app.ts again, and that could be a cyclical reference, and we don't want that. All right, so we also want to, let's just use another little helper, kind of property called hostname, and we'll say our host name for now is localhost, all right, because that's the host name we're going to use, right? And sometimes we also need a database secret, so we're going to say const. We'll call this secret, and that's for us to connect next week with authentication and a session, set up a session. We'll just call this some secret. Let's say, actually, yeah, say some secret like this. Whatever that secret is, you can put it, and the secret is kind of almost like a string that we can use to, almost like a passcode, if you will. And for now, we're just putting it here as some secret, because in real world, we would probably save this up in the database variables up online. Okay, so we have our connection information. We've made a db.ts file. Let's put this up on GitHub. So we'll say we're git add dot git commit -m. We'll say added db config git push. There we go. And finally, our configuration itself. So where do we put that? Inside of my app.ts. So here's my app.ts, but we haven't really configured my app to connect to MongoDB at all. Let's do that now. So again, what we have is our logger. Why is this giving me an error? No, cannot find module HTTP errors. Did we not? Wait, what? Package.json. HTTP errors. That is weird. We have it right here. Huh. And app.ts can't find it. Isn't that interesting? What does it find? Right there. That's weird, isn't it? Huh. That was just me. So yeah, so HTTP errors, we have our routes right here. And before our routes, so this is where we import the router. Here's where we import the router data, right? So the routes, if you will. We want to do the same thing with our Mongoose. So we want to connect to or import Mongoose, import DB specific. Yes, Johan. Import DB package, right? Connection package. And that would be, we would say import Mongoose, right? And then from Mongoose. That's what you want. Okay, import Mongoose from Mongoose. Mongoose, again, is our package that allows us to connect to the database. And then we've configured our Express application. That's nice. We've also exported it down here as our default app. Nice, after we configured everything. And then what we want to do is, after this, we want to kind of make our DB configuration. What does a DB configuration look like? Well, we want to import, and this is a new way of doing it. Again, if I want to import all the properties or all the functions from one location, from one module, I showed you how to do individual ones. So in our controllers, we have display home, display about, display project, and so on. And in my routes, what I did was I got you guys to insert individual functions this way. But you can do it another way. And the other way to do it is you could say that import, and then you can say everything, so star, and then as the friendly name, we want to assign a friendly name to package or wrap all of those functions or properties in. We're going to call this dbconfig. That's the name we're going to use from where the module is, which is again ./db, right? So ./db because it's looking inside the same folder and in the db file, db.ts. So now, whenever I hover over dbconfig is a wrapper, right, for all of the configuration variables that I've created here. So similar to what I could have done in my controllers, right? So for example, in my routes, instead of doing this way, I could say something like, I can do another import statement. Don't do this. I'm just going to show you what it works. So import star as, and then something like my index controller, right? From, and then you can do that /controllers /index, and that is another way to do the same thing as this, but instead of being very explicit in case which ones we want, we can say we want it all. And then if I hover over index controller, it says it's never been used, but the way it would work is something like index controller dot, and you can see it has access to all those methods, right? So if you wanted to package it up into one piece, this is how it would look, okay? So it's definitely a way we could do it. I just did it the long way just to show you that that is also a possibility. I want to show you different ways of using modules, and that's why we're going through this whole process. All right, so good. Let's go back to my app.ts for a second. So yes, I used import star as dbconfig from ./db, and that kind of, on line 16, it injects all the data that's inside of db.ts inside of my dbconfig. dbconfig is now a wrapper for my objects. And what I can say is, hey, Mongoose, I want to connect. This is the method to do it. Mongoose connects to the database. How I'm going to connect it, notice it says I need a URI string. Well, we know the URI is inside of my DB configuration, so I'm going to just type in dbconfig.local URI. That's the URI string, followed by my callback if I want to have any kind of, when I connect, some kind of callback function. If I don't put that in there and I just do this, that's also acceptable. Something that looks like this. And by the way, if I have an issue with doing anything like this, it'll give me a warning down here in NodeMon. Let's start with this. Okay, so something like I want to connect to this thing here. So sure, I connect, but I want to listen for when I connect, right? So the way that works is I could say something like const db then, right, is equal to my mongoose dot connection, right? And this again is an alias for the mongoose connection. Okay, so I don't have to put this in. I can just call this mongoose.connection. Okay, but now instead of using mongoose.connection, I can say db.on. Notice that there is on. On is an event that I can listen for, similar to what we did with jQuery. If you took jQuery at all, if you learned jQuery in your COMP229, and then the name of the event. For example, I want to have an open. When I open my connection, then I can call a callback function. I can use a callback function to respond after I've connected. I cannot type today at all. And then I can say some kind of console log. Here's my console log, where I can say something like connected. Let's use a template string because we're using ECMAScript. Connected to MongoDB at, and then we can pop in the connection string, right? db config, and we can use .hostname, whatever that hostname is that we use. Okay, so that is going to respond whenever we connect, right, to MongoDB. It's going to tell us that we're connected properly. If this doesn't trigger, if this doesn't work, we're not connected if we don't see this thing. And we should probably put some kind of error as well, all right? So this is my db.onOpen. What about on error? db.on error. If I have an error, I could definitely do the same thing. I can say, let's do a function as a callback, and I could do a console.error where I can put out the error, which is something like connection error. Okay, that is also an option. So these are kind of a couple of events that I'm using when I connect. All right, steps. Let's go back to steps. So one, you have to import the database package. So step one, import the database package, okay? And step two, complete the database configuration, right? So this is the database configuration here, right? And really, this part here belongs with this part, okay? Step three, listen for connections or errors. And that's your connection to MongoDB. Step one, step two, step three. All right, let's do that. Let's look at NodeMon and see if we connect. And if we were connecting, then it would show up, wouldn't it? Because I'm starting NodeMon. So there is a problem, right? And I wanted to point this out to you because what we're expecting down here is some kind of connection string to trigger. But we're not getting it, my friends. And here, notice that even though we're trying to connect, it says that these are all the connection, this is the connection information. It's trying. See how it's moving? It's trying to connect. And what we're going to get is this error, this timeout. Okay, and the timeout says connection error, and we have this timeout that comes in here. And I talked about what this is. Our address, which is localhost 27017, it doesn't like our address whatsoever. That's what it is. It also shows an error refused, right? This is an error refused. And if you scroll down there, it says topology description is unknown, right? This is something else that is here, right? So this is kind of information that we've got. So to change this, I'm going to go to my db.ts. Notice I have this port number right here. Let's just remove the port number like this. So now our local URI is going to be MongoDB : / localhost and the name of my my database, which is media. Let's save that. And let's see what happens now when I go back to node-mod, and does it restart? Again, the idea is that we should get a connection string right away. And if we have a problem, it's going to tell us that there's a problem, right? So this is my local, we're going to do some troubleshooting here today to show you what the possibilities could be, right? One thing is, yeah?
Um,
Yeah, but I'm showing you that it's crashing still, right? So this is what I'm showing you here. You'll get this piece right here because we have to talk about how to fix this up, right? Because this is it. But yeah, sure. App.ts is right here, and you can see what we're doing. We're saying let's open up. Here's our open connected. We're listening for a connection to open up, right? And we're having an issue because we're not connecting. We're not connecting, right? So I want to point this out because I don't want you guys to freak out when you try to do this on your own, right? Because one of the issues that we always have is, well, you know, Tom, you showed us this thing, but it didn't work, and I can't connect to my database, and blah, blah, blah. The reason why you can't connect to your database is because of our configuration. So I wanted to point this out to you so you're clear on what the possible issues could be. Okay, so that's possible issues. So we know we have a potential configuration issue. And the two configuration problems that could happen is the port number in our local URI. So if I go back to my db.ts, it's having trouble with this part, localhost. Okay, that's where it's having problems. So what it's really looking for, it can't really resolve localhost, doesn't know what that is. So what it wants instead is 127.0.0.1 and then media, the name of the database. That's what it could be. Okay, let's try that again. Let's save this again one more time and go back to here and see what if it fixes that problem. And hey, look at that. Immediately we get a connection. So really, it didn't like this part, localhost being in here. It wanted me to be explicit with the IP address. That's what it wanted. It couldn't figure this out in my hosts file, right? What 127.0.0.1, that is localhost. Okay. Next, so that is a problem. That was the problem that we fixed, and we did that in the db.ts file. Okay. In the app.ts file, let's go back there for a second, right? In the app.ts file, then there's also some additional things we can put in here when we're connecting. So right now, when we do a connection, in the past, in my video that I showed you guys online, if you're to watch that video at all, when I do a Mongoose Connect, there's also additional details. Notice it says some options are the URI plus some options, Mongoose connection options, right? Nowadays, it's not required. They simplified it for us. If you want to add specific Mongoose connection options, you can, but this db-config.local URI or whatever the URI is that you're using is just enough. It's enough for it, okay? So you can see here, again, that we're connected now to our database. Great, now that we've connected to the database, we've done that. Let's put this up on GitHub. So git add dot, git commit -m, and we're gonna say successfully connected to database. We'll say MongoDB. How about that? Git push. So we successfully connected to it to make sure that things are okay. And now we need to do something with that data. How do we get that data? What does it look like? Well, we need some kind of route because up online right now, we have no way of getting that data. We need a request. We're going to say, I want to go to something called movies list. There is no movies list, so it's going to give us an error right now, a 404 not found, because we don't have a movies list route defined and we don't have any controller that does this for us, okay? So how do we make this? Well, we start with the router. Okay, so let's go back to the router, index route. And if we think about this as an example, the index route is pretty simple, right? If we think about it, how will the index route look? And does the movie list really belong in the index route? And the answer is it doesn't really belong. Okay, it doesn't really belong. But well, let's add it in temporarily. So we'll say there's a temporary section. So we'll say temporary. right? What we want to do for our temporary route is going to look like this, our router.get, and we want to make it so that it goes to the movie list. So that's the path. So slash movie dash list, we're adding a new route, and then followed by some kind of, controller. And maybe that controller is going to be called something like display movie list, display movie list. And you can see that the display movie list controller does not compute. It doesn't come up with anything like that. It gives us a bit of an error. And why? Because we're not importing it, number one, and hey, it doesn't even exist. Let's make this display movie list controller exist inside of the controller's file. So here, again, we'll put a little temporary section in here, temporary. And I'm making it temporary because it doesn't really belong here, temporary, right? So we're going to say export function display movie list. There it is. And just like before, we want to have in a request response and next function. There it is, request response and next, right? Except that it's going to do a little bit more than just what we did before, right? Because when we display our movie list, we want to access the database. So this is our first little database configuration that we're going to go into right now. So what does this look like, actually, right? When we think about this, again, we have to access Mongoose. That's something we need. We don't have that in here. We don't have Mongoose. That's why it's temporary. It doesn't really belong inside of my top level routes, right? It belongs in its own file. But let's suppose now that we're going to put it here for now. Okay, we want to put it here for now. So again, we need to access Mongoose somehow. We need access to the model, right? So let's add the model in here. So model access, we'll put it down in here for now. Doesn't matter where we put it. But I want to say something like import the name of the model, movie, right, from, and then the name of the models folder. So it's going to be ... slash, right? And then it's going to be models slash, and then movie. So that is the movie model we're going to get. We need the movie model so we can do something with the movie list. That's what we want. And so that's the first thing. So we need to do this. We have Express already, so we're good. But we definitely need to do the movie model. And the movie model, remember, if I go back into the movie folder, it already has Mongoose. It already imports Mongoose. So it's going to do some of the heavy lifting for us. Let's go back to there. So that is the display movie list. Because display movie list now exists inside of my controller, I can save it. And in here, all I need to do is I need to include it here. So if I was to retype this, so display movie list, you can see now I can get that little purple cube. When I do that, it adds display movie list into the list of things that I want to import. So that display movie list is the function that's going to be called through the controller module. Okay, that's what it works. So there's display movie list. Let's go back to that controller. Remember, this is a temporary thing that we're doing in here. How does this look? Okay, we're going to use, hey, movie, I want to find, remember that what we did using Mongosh, right? If I was to go to Mongosh here, right? We kind of show DBS. So here's our databases. We want to use media. We want to show collections to see the collection. And then I want to do db.movies.find, and it shows us all of this. So I want to do the same thing. I want to say, hey, I want to find. I want to use the find method, just like we do here in our MongoDB shell. So let's quit. We don't need this anymore. I just want to show you what that looks like. So, okay, that's nice. So we say movie.find, and then I want to have a callback function. It tells us what we need. We need a callback function here, right? The callback function would be a function, and there's two parts to it. It tells us the two parameters. One is some kind of error, and the other one is a result that is going to be an array of any. It's going to be an array of data. So again, it's going to be some kind of error callback, followed by an array of data, which we're going to call the movies collection. That's what the data is going to be called. We're just making that a friendly name. We can call this whatever we want, but that is the movies collection that we're going to use. And okay, well, what happens if there's an error? So we're going to say if there's an error, we don't want to continue. We've got a problem. So we'll do a console error, right? Console error, the error. And the error is this thing, the error that comes in through our request to find the movie and all the movies in the database, right? That's the error callback. It's going to be if there's an error, output it, please, and stop us from doing anything else. We're going to do a response and error, which is going to stop our response object right there. However, what if there's not an error? If everything is okay, we're going to do a response render, a res render, where we're going to go to our index template, which is this template right here inside of our views folder, index template. And we're going to make a brand new, kind of object. We need a title, which we're going to call, movies or something like that, right? Our movie list, that's our title. And then followed by our page, which we don't have yet, but we're going to make. We're going to call this the movie-list page, followed by one more thing, another piece of data that this special thing has that none of the other ones have, which is our movies collection. We'll call this movies, which is just going to be our movies collection that we're getting in from our database, this one right here. So it's going to be the movies collection, all right? And that is what we're going to render. Notice that this little piece of code here is accessing the database, right? And it's inside of my controller folder, right? Inside of my controller, my index controller right here is what we're modifying. This function, which is our display movie list function, is actually being accessed by my route, which is my, right here, this temporary route, which is display movie list, okay? I'm calling it temporary route because it doesn't belong here, and we're going to move it hopefully before the day's over. Okay, cool. Well, how do I show that I'm going there? I don't have a page to go there because notice what it says is in my controller, it says I need a page that's called movie list. I don't have a movie list page. Okay, I don't have this page. Let's make it. So inside of my views, my content, we're going to make a brand new page. So new file. We're going to call this movie-list because that's what it should be called, movie-list.ejs. It's an empty page right now, right? What does this page need for us to make it useful, right? What does it need? I'm going to do a little bit of typing, and forgive me because it's going to be there's going to be a bit more than normal, but it's okay. So one is I want to have some kind of h1 tag in here where I'm going to inject the movie list page. So let's just, instead of doing that, injecting it, we'll just say movie list. How about that? Okay. And then the next piece of code is going to be a div tag, and we're going to use some Emmet here to help us out. A div tag with a class of row. And inside of that, we're going to have a div tag with a class of column. So when I do this, remember, it shows us our Emmet abbreviation. This is what it's going to generate for us, right? Div class with a div with a class of column. And I need a couple things in there. For now, I need a table, right? So let's just do this. So inside of this structure, I want a table. And the table is going to have a class of table and then table-striped and then table-bordered. This is where the data is going to be shown. And then table-hover. Okay, so that's where the, let me just make sure that that is also a class. That's how it's going to look. Table-hover. And when I do that, this is what you get, right? Inside of the table, I want a table head, right? With a class of table-dark. And inside the table head, I want a table row, right? With a bunch of table headings. Table row with a bunch of table headings. So I could simply have done it like this. I could have said table row with table headings times, and I want a couple things here. I want my some kind of ID, my name of my movie, my the year that it was made, right? Name, year, director, and rating. So I need like at least 5 columns, right? And maybe a couple of more, which I'm going to use later on. So let's say 7 columns, all right, is what I want to use. So 7. So times 7. And if I did this, it does, notice what it's going to do is generate all this for me, right? So tr with a class of th, I don't want that. It's tr. Inside of that, I want a table header times 7, right? With a table header with a class of column times 7. That's what I want, okay? So if I press enter, you're going to see it does this. So now the first column is going to have, let me just take that back. So instead of a class of column, I could also add something else, which is what I want. I want a, you can add other things, other properties, like for example, a scope is what it should be. Scope, you know, as an example, that's what the property is going to be. A scope of column. Scope of column times 7. So it's going to have a scope of column times 7. All right, if I was to do that times 7, you can see it does the wrong thing. So scope didn't really work. So scope is what I want. And if I was to do just scope like this, so scope, and if I did that, it does nothing. I want each of the objects to have a scope of column. And the other way, of course, to do it is to copy paste. So tr with a table header with a scope of column. So scope is equal to column. There we go. And then I also want a class for the first one with a class of text-center. If I can make class, there we go, text center. Ha. And the data is like this, so it's going to be a dot. And then the next one is a table header. So table header, wow, with a scope of column. Just not liking me today. And then this will be the movie name. You can make as nice names as you want. And let's just do that a bunch of times. So movie name. And this would be the, again, you might want to say name, the year, the director, and the rating. Right, that's what I want inside of the table row. That's the header. And I want a couple of more in here, one more, because we're going to add we're going to be able to edit the table next week, and we're also going to be able to do full CRUD. All right, so today we're just reading. Okay, so name, year, director, rating is what we want so far. And that's the table head. And in the table body, this is where it gets a little funky. So T-body. And I'll have the T-body with an ID of, we'll call this movie list. Okay. So in my table body, this is, I'm going to have a repeatable section in here that we're going to use. So this is where the repeatable section is going to be. Repeatable rows. And the way we're going to do repeatable rows inside of EJS, right, is we're going to use a for loop. We're going to say, hey, EJS, we want a for loop, because we can use JavaScript kind of syntax here, where we want to say that the count that we're going to get is going to start with 0, where count is less than, and if you notice if I go back up to my controller says it's going to be called movies. Okay, that's what the collection is going to be called that I'm going to pass into the file. I'm going to pass in the movies collection. It's going to be called movies. Remember, there's 3 properties, title, page in this case, and movies. This is new, right? And it's going to go here. So I'm looking for movies, where movies movies.length, if it's less than movies.length, and then I'm going to do a count plus plus, just like we normally do any other for loop. And we're opening up our curly brace, but we're not closing it here. So this is what it would look like for EJS. When we start a for loop, we just kind of open up the curly brace, but we don't close it off. And then let's use the closing brace here, where we would close it here. This is what it would look like. So anything between these two braces, right, is what's going to be repeated inside the for loop. Notice that the curly brace is on its own right here. Okay. So what do we want in here? Well, we want some table rows again. So I'm going to say I want a repeatable table row. So table row is what I want in there. And in my table row, I'm going to have a table header, right? And the table header is going to have a scope of row in this case. Here's my row. All right, that's the table header. With a class, that's the class of text center. That's what I want my class to be. And inside of here, inside the actual data, this is where the data goes right here. I want to say, let's inject it using EJS. We'll have the counter in here, +1, whatever the counter is, +1. Okay, so that it won't start at 0. Because remember, this is using 0-based counting, and we want to start our database count by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it's going to be. So that is our first row. Our first row is going to count however many movies are inside the database that we're passing to this file. It's going to count that many, and it's going to make its own repeatable section. Okay, let's just finish it off, and then I'll talk about it. We'll have a table data now. So this is row data, right? And our table data, let's do this way like this, table data. What it needs in our table data is the data that's going to be shown in the table, which is, we're going to use EJS here. We're going to inject our movies count, right? And we're going to use the name, the first property of the movie, which is the name of the movie, movies count name, that we're going to inject in here. So this is our what's going to be injected inside of the columns. So for the first column, we're going to have, which is the header column, right? We're going to have a count, right? So count, remember, because count is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And for the table data, we're going to actually have the name of the movie is the second column, right? Let's keep going. Just use some copy paste here. We're going to say movies count, and the next one would be year, and movies count director, and then movies count rating. Okay, those are that's part. It's following the exact same process as our model. Our model looks exactly like this, right? Name, year, director, rating, and we're getting this data, right, from the movies collection that we're getting from the database. Bear with me here while I finish. And following that, there's two empty data table columns, right? So another table column there that's empty for now, and one more. And we're going to fill those in next week. Okay, so that is our repeatable row. Questions around this so far? Why the equal after the percent, less than percent? You mean here? Here. So less than percent equals, what this means is inject inside of this little space here data, whatever that data is going to be, which is this part right here, right? So inject my counter, which is coming from my for loop right here. That's what this means, right? Whereas this one means I want a directive. Here's a directive, do a for loop, end the for loop. That's what this part means, right? Which is different than injecting data. All right, so that is the the little movie list. And this movie list is actually if you think about it, is a EJS file that it's going to be read from, the data that's going to be read from our views folder. So views, content folder, movie list, EJS. Let's back it up a little bit. Let's go back to our route. Our route says if the user goes /movie list, if the user puts this in the URL, I want you to server, I want you to go to the display movie list function that's inside of my my controller. Okay, let's go there. So go to definition. Okay, good. And it jumps me right here where it says my display movie list function gets a request, response, and next object. And what it does is it uses the movie model. There's my movie model to connect to the database and issue a find command. And when I issue the find command, it's going to have two pieces, an error and some kind of movies collection or data that's going to be stored, an array of data that's going to be stored in the movies collection variable. I've just named this movies collection, but you can name this whatever you want. If there's no error, then I want you to render inside of the index template. I want you to pass in a object literal that includes a title property, a page property, and the movies property. And the movies property happens to be an array of type any, an array of type any. That's going to be passed into the index template and then into the page, which is my content page. That's what my content page is. Let's go back into that template. So then in the template, I include the header, I include the footer, and inside of my content section, it's going to go content / the name of the page, which is movie list, right? .ejs. Let's go there. Movie list says inside of there, I'm going to display a table, and I'm going to make a repeatable row where I'm going to use a for loop with EJS to inject data from the movies collection inside of here several times. Once, I'm going to create this once for each object inside of the movies collection. That's what it does. All right, let's see if this works. So again, going back to here, and let's see if it crashed or if my nodemon is working. My nodemon says it's okay. It was a 404, but if I go back out to my page and refresh now, well, it's still a 404, movies list. Movies list. And why? Why is that a movies? Well, it's trying, actually. Something's going on, right? Because there it is, a 404. Movies list is a 404. Okay, let's take a look and see why it's giving us a 404. One is make sure you save everything. Maybe I spelled it wrong in my router. So in my router, index.ts, let's go back and see what I spelled it like. Oh, I said movie-list, not movies list, which means this is what this should be, a movie list. Movie list is what it's looking for. And if I do that, bam, we have our movies. Now this is pretty wide and it tells us all the data, but this is a great test that it's working for you, right? And if we want to make it look nicer, then we can go inside of our movie list page and we can surround this thing inside of a content div or a container div. So we can say something like div.container, right? Which is, we can grab all of this stuff, cut it out, put it inside of here. And now if I save this and if I refresh, we should be able to see a movies list kind of in a smaller area. Nice, nice, nice. And you can see if I hover over, I get that hover effect because that is something that's coming from our Bootstrap. Okay. So notice it read the movies in exactly that order. Okay. Right? And that's our little page. Let me give you this page. If you haven't had a chance to type this thing or if you're too slow, I'll give you the movie list.ejs so you have it. So inside of our server, views, content, here's our movie list.ejs page. You can have that. Okay, we did that part. And that will help you with making sure that your configuration matches mine. I know we're running overtime as normal, but this is nice and everything is great. And let's put this up on GitHub, but we have some things to do, some housekeeping. We'll say we successfully read data from MongoDB, which is what we did. Git push. So, okay, that's interesting. We were able to read the data through some kind of new view that we made, but some people are still confused about how this was done. Right here is where all the magic happens right here, right? We made a for loop. We created a new variable called count. And this is the beautiful thing about doing things with EJS. And we have the movies property. The movies property didn't come from nowhere. It came from our router, right? And the router called the display movie list. The display movie list is inside of our, it uses the movie model. And the movie model, which basically specifies name, year, director, and rating as our schema, is used in the controller right here. This is the controller. So the controller goes and connects to the database, finds the movie collection, and returns a movies property that takes this movies collection, which is an any array, an array of any type of data, and stores it inside of the movies property, then passes this entire object to the template, which is this file right here. Here's my template. And then I go to the page, and that page has the data which is that I'm looking for, which is my movies data. And then that movies data is the thing that I'm repeating for every movie in movies. I'm repeating, and I'm going to show that row. That's how it works. Okay. But this data does not this is okay. This movies list is okay in my content folder inside the views folder. But what's not okay is the fact that I have this root, which is movies list, and it's inside of my top level roots. This is only for top level roots, not for specific sub roots that I'm going to put. And one day I want to protect this root so that you can't get to it. A lot of times what we want to do is when we have a separate section or subdomain, if you will, that we're going to make, we can put this inside of its own file. We can split the roots up because sometimes it's too cluttered to put everything in one place. So how do we do that? And how do we make a separate root for our movies? Well, we want to make a new file in the roots folder first. Let's do that. So in the roots folder, we're going to make a brand new file. We'll call this movie list .ts. There we are. So same thing as before. And in our movie list.ts, we're going to have different requirements, right? Different requirements. So yes, we need Express and the Express router because we're doing routing. We need this part. So I'm going to put that in our movie list. And we also need to make this file a module. So in the bottom, we definitely need this part. Okay, so this is how we can make our own router for our movie list. Yay, we got that. Now we want to import from the controller. Oh man, the controller has some temporary data that we don't want. We don't want our controller to have all of this. This is our index controller only for our index routes. We want another controller that's separate. Okay, so no problem. Yes, you can, Sarah, unless they're already gone. All right, so I want to make a new file here under controllers. I'm going to call this the movie list.ts controller. So again, there's the same file name, but they're in different folders. We read this as movie list route and the movie list controller. This is how we do it. So inside of our movie list controller folder, right? Then we want, or in our file, we want some of the similar things that we have in our index. Like we have here, we have an Express. We definitely want this. So we want that in our movie list controller. Definitely want that. And we also want to export this. So again, in my controllers folder, we definitely want the export function that we want, which is this part right here. This is the function that we want to lift from here. So I'm going to cut it out of here. Cut. Okay. Now we're going to have some errors for now, but it's okay. I've cut it out of here inside of my index controller, save, and I'm going to put this inside of my movie list controller here. So this is what my movie list controller will look like now, which only has a display movie list. That's the only function that it has. Hey, now we split it off. So index.ts, well, we've removed some stuff, right, from index.ts. It doesn't belong there because our index controller is only for our top level routes, right? And my movie list controller is only from my movie routes. We're going to have other ones. Okay, cool. And then in my index router, we're trying to grab our display movie list, but it doesn't exist. So we're not going to do that anymore, which means we're going to have an error down here, but we need to grab this temporary stuff, cut it out, and put it inside of my movie list route, which should be here. So we only have one route right now in the movie list, which is just this one. Okay, we don't have this one anymore. We can get rid of this temporary, code right here. Save. And go back to my movie list route. And the reason why this isn't computing is because we got to import the movie list. So we're going to say something like import, and we can say the name of the function, which is display movie list, right? And we're going to say, where is it coming from? From, right? From // controllers / movie list. And now we're good. So now all we've done is we split out our movie list controller and our movie list router from index router and index controller. That's all we've done. However, this is not going to work because although we've made the routing happening here in our files, we need to now change the app.ts configuration. Our app configuration does not include anything to do with movie list route. Let's make that happen. So again, in my app.ts, notice at the top, we've included our router data for our index router. We need another piece of data for our movie list router. That's the next thing we're going to include, right? So let's do that. So we're going to call this a new route. We're going to say import, and we'll call this the movie list router from // routes / movie list. So that's a movie list router, right? So we got our index router, which is our top level routes. That's what this is. Top level routes. And these are only for our movie list routes. Movie list routes. So this is what we did here, but notice it's grayed out because we've never used it. We've imported it. We have an object that includes the movie list routes, but we need to add or configure our application to use the movie list routes, which is down here. So notice it says app.use / and we have index router. We want to do kind of the same thing for now, where we say app.use, and we're going to do the same thing with app.use, right? These are all of our routes right here. And we'll do the exact same thing. We'll say app.use / for now anyway, and we'll call this the movie list router, which is something that we imported above. Now, if that's confusing, let's just go through that process one more time. So again, back to this. So first we split out our movie list route from our index route because index routes had only the routes for our top level routes: home, about, project, services, and contact. Movie list is special because we're going to make its own section. So we want to give it its own routes. Maybe we're going to have a movie list add, remove. So an add, delete, an update, some kind of other functions that we're going to have here eventually as well. Some other routes that we're going to use. And maybe we want these routes to be all protected. So anything we want to do to a series of routes or links, we want them to be in one file. So that's the first thing. But in order for us to split it off, we're also going to access a different controller. So we had to split off our movie list function, display movie list function, from our index controller, which we had it down here. So that's what we did. So we split it off into its own controller, movie list.ts, right? And then after we did that, we had to configure the app.ts to use the new router, which is right here. So this is where we import it, and then we use it down in here. This is where we actually use all the routes, right? So use routes. Okay. So now that we've got that, let's make sure we save everything. And when we did this, what we want to do is we want to test it inside of our NodeMon. And does our NodeMon have any problems? Notice that it crashed a couple of times when we were making all those changes, but now we're back to normal. Let's see if this works now. So if I go back up here, and if I go to services, we're good. And if I go to contact, we're good. But if I type in something like movie list, then we're still good. And that means we've got all of our routes in the right place. So that's what we did there. I know this is a lot, and it always is, but any questions around this stuff? Let's just put this up on GitHub, and I will answer some questions. So again, git add dot, git commit -m, and we'll say split, or we'll say created movie list routes and controller. Okay, that's what we did. And we have everything up on GitHub now for you. Any questions? So Jean says you're good. Anyone else has any questions or concerns? When you look at this thing, is it starting to make sense? I'm hoping it's starting to make sense. Saeed says, sir, I have a problem with my Heroku. Yes, I'll do that after. All right. Is this making sense though? Is this starting to look like it's making sense? This part. And the reason why I'm hoping it is because it's now we finally have our model view controller set up in our server folder. We finally have that. We have a movies.json, some mock data that we can use again. The only thing we don't have is we haven't put this up on our database, which we're going to do next week. Okay, so we have Upinder has an issue too. Yeah. Elias. Yeah.
If we created that, if we inserted that information from data movies.json, why do we need that file movies.json there?
This data right here, which is in our client.
You have it open there.
Yeah. The reason. Why do I need it?
No, I mean we inserted that in the database.
Yeah.
So why we need that?
We don't. There? We don't really need it, but I know in the future, because I've done this a couple of times, just a couple of times, right? I know in the future how this course is going to go. And I know we're going to probably need to insert some data up online as well, right? So instead of having to type this over again, I'm putting it here so you guys can use it. That's all it's for. It's not really there because we need it. We don't need this data. It's never being read. It's just some mock data that we can use. So if I want to put this up on MongoDB Atlas later on, I can always just copy paste it very quickly compared to me running it by hand, right? Okay, good. Any other questions before we go back to what we're doing? So far what we've done is we restructured for MVC. We split out our controllers and models. We added new NPM modules. We created a simple database in our local MongoDB server. We connected to the database and we read a list of our movie data. And then finally we displayed the list of data in a table. And that's what took up all of our time today. All right. Remember that a lot of this is already up on the course shell. A lot of the same stuff we did is already up there. And all I'm doing is doing it again with you with Typescript so you understand the process, which is the most important thing. I want you guys to understand my thinking, which is maybe in many ways more important than actually just following along and copy pasting. Copy pasting is okay, and at least you're following along. But the thinking part, how I've structured things, is what I want you guys to get. Because I'm just going to close this off here for a second. Let's close all these little things here. So again, if you look at my structure, it's looking like this now. So views, routes, models, controllers, config. And you can see that our structure is a bit more complex. There's more files, but it shouldn't be something that is undecipherable. You should understand why the things are here at this point. If you don't, this is the point of discussion that you and I have to spend some time together to go over if you need it. I have some limited time, but one thing to note is to go through it, watch the videos, do your own reading, and then come into class with some good questions if you have any questions about how this is all stitched together. Because that is what people don't understand. How does our apt config know, what's inside of my index router and my movie list router? Well, we're using the ECMAScript module pattern, so EJS or ESM. It's the ESM module pattern, right? And my ECMAScript module pattern basically connects or stitches together my router, which is inside of my routes folder, inside of my index.ts file, and it kind of holds a reference to it right here. This is the reference. My index router is a reference to all the routes that are in my index .ts file. That's what it does. When I export my default router, it's after I've configured it. What I'm doing every time I do a get, I've configured my router so it listens for a /home, a /about, a /projects, a /services, and a /contact URL. Any one of these URLs is going to compute because I've put them in here. I've listed them here, right? And this is very explicit. Same thing with my movie list router. My movie list router only right now has one route, but it computes if I type in movie-list, but not movies.list because we never did that. We don't have that. Okay, so that is what we did. Any other questions before we stop this? And I'll go and help people out for the day. So we've kind of accomplished our task for today. Okay, so let's stop this recording. And for just a little bit of housekeeping, just a note, for people who still haven't submitted their assignment 1, although it was due on assignment 1, again, was due on Sunday, one thing to note with assignment 1 is you can still submit it until Wednesday at a loss. So if you haven't submitted it and if you're struggling with it or whatever, you can. I typically leave the Dropbox open for a couple of days afterwards. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. By Wednesday, if you haven't submitted your assignment 1, then you won't be able to submit it anymore. So Wednesday is when the Dropbox closes. Now, there's other people have asked me for extensions and all that kind of stuff. Like I've told you before, guys, unless there's an extraneous reason, you have a health problem or something like that, there's no extensions, right? So please submit your stuff as soon as possible. You will lose marks today. If you submit it anytime today between now and midnight, you lose 20% of your final grade, but it's not a complete loss. Please do not. I know some people, what they do is they get frustrated and they don't submit anything. And that would be a very bad mistake because remember that each of these assignments, which is individual, is worth 15% of your final grade. If you don't submit your assignment 1 or assignment 2, you've lost 30% of your final grade. But if you take a loss, let's say somehow, let's use a calculator here to show you the thing here. Let's suppose you submit tonight, right? Well, that's still okay, right? Because if I take 15 maximum, so that was your maximum mark, and I kind of multiply that by 0.8, that means you're out of 12. That means you could potentially get 12 out of 15, which is, if you did perfect, which is awesome, right? But let's suppose I gave you would normally have got a 95%. Let's say I really liked your portfolio, but you handed it in late today. So it's a 95% multiplied by 15, right? Which means you probably get a 14.25 out of 15. Yay, but you handed it in late, which is today. I multiply that by 0.8, which means really you now got 11.4 out of 15 if you hand it in today, which is still a pretty good mark, right? If I do 11.4 out of 15, you're still getting 76%. You're not getting 0. You don't want to get 0, right? It's a big hit, but at the end of the day, it's not 0. So please submit something. And I recommend tonight. If you went tomorrow, right, then you multiply that by, the total by 0.6 instead of 0.8. That would be terrible. So imagine that. You would normally get 95%. I loved your stuff. Let's suppose I love your stuff on tomorrow, right? You normally get 95%, but you know what? Because you handed it in tomorrow, now you only get 8.5%, 8.5 out of 15, which means that you just barely passed, 57%. Why? Because you're 2 days late and you've lost 40% of your grade, right, that you could have got, right? So guys, submit as soon as possible if you haven't submitted. Submitting today is a good idea, all right, if you can. Worst case, if you submit by Wednesday, that means you've lost 60% of your grade. You still get part marks, but you don't get 0. And that would be the same thing as if I really loved your work, right? I'm saying this over and over again because people just don't understand. Well, that's not right. 0.95 times 15. I really love your work, but you handed it in on Wednesday before midnight. That's minus 60%. So times, again, you're only getting 40% of your final grade, which means now you're getting 5.7. Again, it's not 0, but it's not great. And if you looked at divided by 15, I mean, it's not a pass, it's 38%, but it's better than 0. Everything is better than 0, guys. Hand it in. And if you don't hand this in, you won't know how to do. I'm preparing you for what the midterm test is coming with. Your midterm test will include parts from your assignment 1 and assignment 2. If you don't know how to do assignment 1 and assignment 2, your midterm test will be hell. We don't want that. We want you to train yourself with assignment 1 and assignment 2, and then your midterm test will be easy. That's what we want, okay? Questions around your assignment and evaluations that are coming up. Assignment 1 was due Sunday. If you haven't submitted it, submit it as soon as possible. All right, that's it for me. I'm going to stop with this stuff. Hopefully we'll talk again on a Wednesday. I'm going to do another little session for people on Wednesday for section 1. So I'm going to kind of repeat this thing. If you have more questions, and if you couldn't answer it today, or if you can't stick around tonight or today, hit me on Wednesday. Come over to the class on Wednesday. We usually have a class between 12:30 and 2:30 on Wednesdays if you have time, if you can make it out, and you can answer those questions after that. Okay, guys, that's it for me. I'm going to stop recording this on YouTube, and then I'll see you guys next week or on Wednesday if you have more questions.
Can we have the one?
Yeah, go ahead. What's going on?